Hello and welcome back to the Warwick F1 Show. I'm Will Kingswood and we are here with another episode looking at the return of the Australian Grand Prix. Obviously, it's been 3 years now since 2019, since we were last in Melbourne. We did go there in 2020, but obviously with the start of the pandemic, the race was cancelled and the world was thrown into a bit of turmoil. But we're back. We're back for what I would say was quite a good race. Obviously, Charles Leclerc getting his first Grand Slam in his career, but behind him, Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz retiring from the race, arguably his biggest title rivals at the moment. Mercedes and Perez putting it in some solid performances. There were some good performances down the field, and one team in particular had a torrid time of it this week. Obviously, I can't do this on my own, so I'm here with my co-host Chinmay. How are you doing, Chinmay?
Yeah, I'm good, doing well. I mean, just to watch Charles Leclerc just putting Stella's drive after Stella drive after Stella drive, to be honest, it's good to see that the Ferrari hype train is just really up there right now. But to be honest, as a Red Bull fan, things are not going to plan at the minute, so I just hope that Red Bull do sort out their issues. We'll probably go on to that soon.
Well, yeah, you and me both. As a Mercedes fan, I'm sort of looking for them to be a bit quicker. I mean, what would you give that race out of 10? Obviously, I was saying quite a decent race. I'd probably go six, maybe 6.5, maybe 7. Maybe we've been spoiled for choice over the past few years. But what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I'll probably give it a 6.5, 7. I think, especially given how difficult Australia can be to overtake sometimes, I think we would definitely have seen some good racing on Sunday. And yeah, I definitely do feel that maybe it was a least fun race to watch compared to Bahrain and Saudi, but it's still a good race nonetheless.
Yeah, and we'll dive straight into it. Obviously, since we've been here in 2019, there hasn't just been a change in the cars, there's been a change in the track as well. Obviously, some corners extended. I think off the back straight, that turn was made a bit more 90 degrees to encourage overtaking. But the big one was the removal of I think it was a turn 7, 8 chicane, just to make it.
I think it was 9 and 10, but yeah, something like that.
Yeah, just to make the racing a bit better. And going into the weekend, there was talk of having 4 DRS zones. So one going down the main straight, one after turn 2, and then a DRS straight before the fast, I guess, left, right, and then one after that. Obviously, that was dropped down to 3. And what they said was for safety reasons on Saturday, removing the DRS zone before the fast left, right. I mean, did you think that was the best, maybe the correct decision? And do you think it may have impacted on the racing a bit more than what we were expecting?
I think as a whole, it was actually a good choice probably to get rid of that 4th DRS zone. I think maybe the driver generally were a bit worried about reaching that fast chicane at the speeds they were to begin with. And I think especially we saw that even without the DRS, that the cars were approaching that chicane to fast speeds and really just messing up with that corner. So possibly I do think it was a good decision, but I think it did put the position of racing a bit more in a difficult, make it being a little bit difficult for a bit more close racing. But I don't think it made too much of a difference, to be honest.
Yeah, because obviously that complex of corners, that fast left right at Australia, was always one of the iconic ones. It was always the ones where you basically saw an F1 car being pushed to the limits. The track was designed almost perfectly so they could attack it as fast as probably as possible without maybe having to brake too much. And obviously, when you make the straight longer, it's going to reduce that. But there was always that risk of cars going in there side by side, and we saw some cars that did go in there side by side, Carlos Sainz in particular, came unstuck, and obviously him spinning off into the gravel. And I mean, it just seemed like the best decision to do because realistically, it wasn't going to be an overtaking zone. You're not going to go through that corner side by side. Someone is going to lose it and then have to run over the grass, as we saw. And I mean, do you think that they'll keep that decision? Do you think that we'll stay at 3 now? And maybe 4 was just an idea that didn't eventually pan out?
Yeah, I think maybe just for that safety reason, they'll probably just keep the 3. And I think it did have enough. There was enough racing going on elsewhere in the circuit that really you didn't need the extra DRS zone to make much of a difference.
Yeah, and we'll move on to some of that racing, but we'll talk about some racing, but not racing during the race, racing in qualifying. Obviously, we've had Friday practice, we've had P1, P2, P3. We go into qualifying, and there's a very curious incident between Nicholas Latifi and Lance Stroll. So, what was it? It was Latifi, Stroll, sorry, accelerating past Latifi, going out of, I think, turn, it was either turn 5 or turn 6.
Yeah,
Then Latifi trying to get back up the inside of Stroll, Stroll sort of swerving over, and the two of them collided, both Canadians out of the qualifying session. I mean, when you saw that incident, I didn't watch qualifying because one 6 a.m. start per week is enough for me. So, I mean, when I woke up and I saw that incident, it just seemed a very, very curious one. I mean, what were your thoughts as to maybe what you thought of it and who was at fault?
I think though the two people who are involved in the incident, I'm not actually surprised at all, especially with Latifi's tendency to hit the wall a lot in the last few weeks. But and Stroll just sometimes has no presence of mind on the track a lot of the time. But I do feel it was a bit more Stroll's fault because at the end of the day he did not look in his mirror at all when he slowed down. And he just he zooms past Latifi and then he immediately slows down. So Latifi thought it was probably okay to overtake, and then Stroll obviously turned in. But I would say it was both of them fault for just slowing down needlessly. But I'll give a bit more to Stroll for just not looking where he was going.
Yeah, it was such a weird one because, like, obviously Stroll has gone past. Obviously, I think Latifi must have thought he was on a quick lap, and then
Yeah,
Latifi tries to get past. Stroll just moves over on him. It's just
yeah,
there have been a number of incidents where Stroll has turned in, I guess, on a driver that's either on the inside or a driver that is on the inside.
yeah,
I remember back to Portimao
yeah.
with Stroll
No.
and Verstappen as one of the major ones.
And then I think it
He,
happened with Lando as well, where Lando actually got front wing damage or something like that as well in that same
hmm.
race.
Yeah, and it just seems like he doesn't use his mirrors, and
No,
he is a racing driver, and it is very. Was it? I wouldn't say it was even Latifi's fault. Maybe you shouldn't be putting it up the inside. Just go around the outside. It's a bit easier. But there's not much Latifi did wrong there, and I think
no.
maybe he's getting a. I think if this happened to like maybe I'm trying to think of another driver like a Valtteri Bottas, he goes up the inside of Stroll, and they collide. Then it's definitely all pinned on Stroll. I think Latifi, while he has had admittedly a terrible start to the season, is getting like criticizing him here is a bit hard done by from his side.
Yeah. No, I think definitely. It's just, I think obviously Latifi has not, I think people have been giving a lot of criticism to Latifi, but I think this time was a bit too much on just criticizing Latifi for no reason.
Yeah, and we'll come back. Well, actually, we'll come back to both teams a bit later. Obviously, differing fortunes for Aston Martin and Williams this week. Williams getting their first point. Aston Martin looking as far away as ever from even getting near the points places, let alone finishing in them. And we'll move to arguably the driver that had the best weekend of the grid. Obviously, he couldn't improve on it. Like getting that Grand Slam, I think first one for Ferrari since I want to say 2010 Singapore,
Yeah,
Fernando
something like
Alonso.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously that is Charles Leclerc winning the race quite comfortably, getting that pole on Saturday, winning with the fastest or getting the fastest lap as well, which is even more impressive, especially now that fastest lap is worth a point, and leading every lap of the race, which is the one that's hardest to do, especially with pit stop strategies. If you pit before second place or third place and they're in your pit stop window, you lose the Grand Slam. And he is looking very dominant at the moment, Charles Leclerc, and he's sort of not making any mistakes. I know I was saying before the start of the season, I thought Verstappen and Leclerc might come to blows and might start coming to blows quite early. Obviously, last season we saw it just in the second race of the season. Verstappen and Hamilton, not quite colliding, but obviously a bit of aggressive racing in Imola. But there hasn't been that with Leclerc. He's got 2 wins. He's got a second place that could very easily have been a win as well. He's way ahead in the in the drivers' championship. Sorry, I think at least 20, 25 odd points.
Yeah.
Is there anything that can stop Charles Leclerc at the moment?
If Ferrari resort to their old strategy plans, then definitely. But I don't. No, not at this moment. Definitely, he's on another league right now, and especially the frustrations that him and Ferrari have had over the last 2 years is just literally venting out now. So I think at the moment, not really, unless Red Bull can. I think the only 2 other options is if Red Bull can sort out their reliability, and if Mercedes can somehow sort out the speed deficit over the season, which they're perfectly capable of doing. So at the moment, nothing could really stop Leclerc and Ferrari.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned there the last 2 seasons of not quite pain, I guess, in 2021, but definitely pain in 2020. I mean, there were rumblings. I never really understood why, but there were always rumblings that some people at least, thought that Charles Leclerc was not overrated, but possibly the hype was a bit too much. And he is just showing them wrong, isn't he? Because
Yeah,
it's now 3 races in. He's won 2 of them. He's won 2 of them. One of them very commandingly. Bahrain a bit closer, just losing in Saudi Arabia to Max Verstappen. He's putting on champion drives even this early on in the season, and even you have to say this. I guess this early on in his Ferrari career, especially.
yeah. I think definitely it's just the last 2 years have just been so difficult, and I think people just really seem to forget the caliber that people like Charles Leclerc and George Russell come from. I mean, you just look at his junior leagues where they won Formula 2 on the first season that only what George Russell and Oscar Piastri have sort of managed to achieve. So, and I think especially with the cars being slower, I think you can't see why people might start to think, is Leclerc really that good? And it's not really until they get that chance to shine in that front runner's car that they are one different league.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see if Red Bull, especially Verstappen, and we may as well move on to Verstappen as well. Obviously, the biggest title rival that Charles Leclerc has at the moment, but he's only got 25 points because retirement in Bahrain, wins obviously in Saudi Arabia, and then another retirement in Australia. Apparently, a different issue to the one he had in Bahrain.
Yeah,
You think back to the 2021 season, back to obviously his title winning season. He had 3 retirements, if I'm correct. Obviously, the collision with Hamilton in Monza, the tyre blowout in Baku, and then obviously the other collision with Hamilton in Silverstone. I
yeah,
guess maybe we can put Hungary on that list, only getting 1 point after Bottas bowling commenced
yeah,
at the start of that race.
yeah,
So, and you look at there, no mechanical failures throughout that entire season, and then you come to 2022, 2 in 3 races. Like, as a Hamilton fan, could we not have moved those 2 to last season? And then Hamilton would have an 8th title, but I've got to let it go. I've got to let it go. But it is interesting because you look, it harks back to the Red Bull of old, the Red Bull of 2018, where they don't even think they had many cars or many races at least where both cars finished, and it does seem we're returning to that.
yeah. I mean, I just personally hope they do sort out reliability issues because I think realistically the only team right now who could really take the fight to Ferrari is Red Bull, especially with Checo's form Checo finally stepping on to even getting towards Verstappen's pace now. We could actually, if Red Bull was reliable enough and Sainz doesn't have a disaster weekend, which we'll probably move on to in a bit as well, then it will probably be a really good forecast scrubbage, at least for the constructors' title. And yeah, it's definitely concerning to see how Red Bull have just suddenly slipped back from the 2021, where their engine was almost bulletproof to now literally almost 2018 level, where I think it was Danny Rick had 8 retirements that whole season just because of that Renault engine. But it's just it's a bit concerning to see.
Yeah, and especially as you mentioned there, Red Bull appeared to be the only car, at least Verstappen, very, very much so, that can challenge Charles Leclerc. It does seem to be more of a 1-2 structure than perhaps, obviously, not Red Bull. I think everyone was expecting Red Bull to be a 1-2 Verstappen, obviously the head of that team. Maybe Ferrari a bit less. Carlos Sainz, obviously, having a very consistent year, his 17-point race streak coming to an end with his retirement in Australia. Maybe that one was going to be less of a 1-2, but it does seem the battle is going to be between Leclerc and Verstappen. And obviously, Verstappen, not even he was saying, obviously, this is what he says, maybe what he actually believes is different, but he's not even thinking about the title at the moment after 2 retirements in those 3 races. And it's not that you can't blame him, but Red Bull need to sort this out, because at this point, it's realistically cost him 36 points so far at minimum, because it's 2 second places, maybe even more if he could have challenged a bit more in Bahrain, had obviously he not had that incident that forced him out of the race. Could have been more. So that's 36 points lost. He'd be fairly near Charles Leclerc. In fact, he'd probably be like 3 points behind. But as it is, he is, I think, almost 50, 45 odd points behind. And other than that, you can't be losing those points, because even the biggest gap of last season was just 33 points at the Silverstone sprint. And then obviously it came back together. But with Leclerc being on such imperious form, is there much Verstappen can do other than just keep winning races? And it's going to take time to claw back those points.
Yeah. I think, that's the best thing he can do. He can just drive that car as best he possibly can. Because at the end of the day, the reliability is not something he can control. It's something the team and Adrian Newey and co have to sort out. So on his side, all he can do is just really do the best he can and just wait and just be patient.
I mean, and do you think he isn't? Do you think he's being true when he says he's not thinking about the title at the moment, or do you think it's always is that just a bit of media speak, and that they are driving towards at least attempting to compete for the 2022 championship?
Probably just PR talk, to be honest. I mean, at the end of the day, it's Max Verstappen. He's gonna go. If once he gets the chance, he's gonna fight for this win. He's gonna fight for that title. So I think at the end of the day, he's just waiting for Red Bull to sort out the fuel issues at the engine and the reliability issues, just making sure the car can really make it to the end at this stage, and then just really then he'll really just push it. That's what it is, really.
And obviously, maybe they're waiting for a few cracks in the Ferrari armor. Obviously, 2017 and 2018, 2 seasons where Ferrari could have challenged up until the end, but then didn't end up doing so. And there was one crack in the Ferrari armor this race, with Carlos Sainz obviously qualifying in 9th, dropping back to, I think, 14th at the start of the race before trying to overtake Kevin Magnussen round the outside at the fast left right, going off into the grass and spinning off into the gravel, beaching the car out of the race. It was just was it an unlucky weekend for Sainz, or was it partial unluckiness and partial, I guess, a bit of his own making?
I think it was an unlucky weekend that was on his own, or that was his own making, because I feel that Carlos right now, he's might be starting to choke under the pressure of trying to catch up to Leclerc, and you can tell he's visibly frustrated. He's very visibly frustrated with the fact that he can't match Leclerc right now. Because Leclerc is just that 10th or 2 quicker, and knowing someone like Sainz, at this rate now he's got the chance. He's gonna be just as hungry as Leclerc just to fight at the front. So I feel that it might just be partially the pressure now that he's really starting to face for the first time in his career, because let's be honest, especially coming from McLaren when he was practically team leader, now he's gone to Ferrari where the team atmosphere is very different to McLaren, and now he's actually going to have to fight for dominance in the team, and that too against Leclerc, who's a bit more experienced and arguably better than Lando Norris, especially because Lando was just starting up when he was in McLaren. So I think it's just definitely it's just a bad weekend for him to
Yeah.
forget.
And obviously, we say it's a bad weekend. This was the first time in 17 races that he hadn't scored points for the Scuderia. And obviously, it was that consistency I guess, throughout this last season that did drive him to eventually end up finishing fifth in the Constructors' Championship. I always say, but it's always those races that were absolutely bonkers, where you had a 1-2 that were crazy, and then it was just little Carlos Sainz stood there in third place, just you wondering how he got
Yeah,
there. You didn't
yeah,
know what had happened, but he was always there, and it was that consistency. But the problem is, it seems that Leclerc's found that consistency as well. And I think most people can agree that Leclerc always had that extra tenth or two
yeah,
over Carlos Sainz. And it just seems like, especially at the start of that race, when he obviously qualified ninth, I guess through no fault of his own, but maybe warming, like the car couldn't start up apparently at the end of qualifying. So he didn't have that warm up lap for the tyres. He would have got a lap in before Fernando Alonso's crash, I think being about 20 meters away from finishing the lap before the red flag came out. And then dropping back to 14th at the start of the race. Do you think he maybe was trying to do a bit too much too soon, going round the outside of I think it was Kevin Magnussen.
I think it was definitely one of the Hasses. I think it was
Mm,
Kevin Magnussen, but
yeah. But
yeah,
going round the outside there, maybe obviously on the hard tyre, that had clearly not had a good start to the race. It was clearly probably maybe even a bit too cold, even one or even two or three laps into the race. Do you think that was a bit of desperation that ended up not paying off? And I guess as a follow up, do you think he'll learn from that?
yeah. I think there was a little bit of desperation. I think he was just trying to push his way through the grid as quickly as possible. So, but knowing Sainz, the way he will just bounce back, I think he will bounce back very quickly, and he will be under a new flame, hopefully, by Imola, and just really stop pushing again.
Yeah, obviously Ferrari returning back to Italy for it's not technically their home race, but obviously Italian, they're going to be getting the full support
Yeah,
at Imola in a week
yeah,
and a half's time. And you know what? We can't leave them out from the top two teams. Sergio
no,
Perez just having a very casual race, and realistically, that's what he needs to do. As I guess as a number two driver, he needs to be getting as many points as possible. He's realistically not going to challenge for the title. Obviously, when you look at it, maybe he should have a few more points. Obviously, retiring in Bahrain, getting very unlucky with the safety car in Saudi Arabia, and then putting in the best performance he realistically could have in Australia. I mean, he's just being consistent. It's like the Carlos Sainz of last year,
yeah.
and there's not like I wanted to talk about him because it feels mean leaving him out, but there's not much more to say really.
No, I think it's like Perez he's got the pace of what Carlos Sainz would have, but the consistency and the pace and everything, but just the unluckiness of Bottas is like I said, the DNF in Bahrain and obviously the safety car in Saudi. So I think right now I think he just needs some more luck right now more than anything else.
Yeah, and I guess that concludes the top two teams. But speaking of teams and reliability, one team that is slow but reliable as opposed to Red Bull's fastness but unreliability, Mercedes. Obviously, George Russell finishing third on the track, we have to admit, getting quite fortunate with the timing of the safety car. Obviously, he was the last person to pit, and when the safety car came out for Vettel's crash, last person of the top six, or the big three teams to not have pit, see jumping Hamilton and Perez before Perez ended up passing him on track, and obviously Lewis Hamilton bouncing back to qualify or get through to Q3, qualifying. I think it was fourth, or no,
Yeah,
it was fifth. Oh,
yeah,
yeah, no, it was fifth.
yeah,
Qualifying fifth, getting up to third before obviously falling back into the clutches of Perez and then losing a position to George Russell. um, through the safety car, as mentioned earlier, it almost feels like Mercedes are like Perez, but just as a team. They're just being very consistent, and realistically, that's all they can do at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the car is just literally in the middle of nowhere right now. It's not fast enough to compete with Red Bull and Ferrari, but they're well ahead of the rest of the midfield. Like, you see the rest of the midfield, McLaren, Alpine, you can say AlphaTauri as well. They're not that. Those teams are just seem to be really close to each other, and Mercedes just seems to be in that no man's land with fifth and sixth, and the third in constructors. So I think there's nothing going other than the real performance of the car and the porpoise, and there's nothing really going wrong with that team at the moment. So yeah,
They're just a bit slow. They're not
yeah,
doing anything wrong on track. Their car's just a bit slow,
yeah,
and it's got very 2017, 2018 vibes in that there's two teams at the front. Obviously, then we had Mercedes and Ferrari. Now we've got Red Bull and Ferrari, and then you've got the third team that's like clearly better than everyone else, but clearly worse than the top two teams. You had that. I guess you had that. I say 2017 and 18 with Mercedes, Ferrari, and then Red Bull a bit further back. You probably had that last season as well with Mercedes, Red Bull, and then Ferrari and McLaren. But obviously, there's that competition making it a bit more interesting. Obviously, we mentioned it on the last show, but now we've got into the third race. There hasn't really looked to be much improvement. Do you think that Mercedes can climb out of the hole? I think maybe I think the title might be. It's quite early to say, but as a Mercedes fan, I think the title might be gone. This might be the first, obviously, year of the hybrid era that Mercedes don't win the constructors. But do you think they will end up challenging for wins by the end of the season?
I think definitely wins. I mean, if knowing how Mercedes can now really outdevelop especially in the second half of the season. I mean, you look at 2017, 2018 again as the prime examples when Ferrari seemed to be having the faster car and Sebastian just leading the championship by the summer break, and then come out of nowhere, Mercedes has a much faster car. So I really do think the Mercedes at least could get a few wins by the end of the season. Then championship possibly out the reach at this stage. But we'll see how it goes, I suppose.
Yeah, and obviously there was all this talk about last season which team is giving up on their 2022 performance to focus on 2021 between Red Bull and Mercedes. It seems to have proved that Red Bull might have given up a bit, or not given up, but might have sacrificed a bit of 2021 for 2022. Obviously, ends up working for them, Max Verstappen winning the Drivers' Championship. Do you think Mercedes might do that this year as well for 2023? Especially, obviously, you mentioned there how Mercedes come on really strong in the second half of the year with development. But do you think maybe they sacrifice a bit of that to put it into the 2023 car and then launch themselves back up to the level of Ferrari and Red Bull?
Yeah, I really see that's probably the plan, especially I think with the new cost caps as well. That's a bit different compared to this season, 2017-18, that sort of time. I think Mercedes might start just to pour a bit more resources into next year's car because at the time they'll probably fix the issues of the Mercedes porpoising and get up to speed. It might just be too late for them to compete for the championship. So yeah.
And I mean, we're three races in now. George Russell somehow second in the championship and definitely the third best car. Just I guess highlighting his consistency. He's arguably been, maybe apart from Charles Leclerc, obviously, the most consistent driver on the grid, and that is why he is, the most consistent finisher on the grid. With obviously, you can say Verstappen and Perez have been quite consistent, but then their car has also been consistent in blowing up. So Russell second in the championship. I think Hamilton is fourth or fifth. I want to say. I'll let you Google that quickly while I keep rambling. But yeah, so Russell is definitely coming into a new team. Obviously, there were a few questions about how well he'd perform. I think maybe at the back end of last season, Latifi was challenging him a bit more. Obviously, it still wasn't close, but it was maybe a bit closer, and people were beginning to question George Russell. But he's come in and he's not doing better than Lewis Hamilton. I think they're very, very closely matched. Obviously, Saudi Arabia may be a bit of an outlier in terms of how Hamilton performed in particular. But are you impressed with how George Russell has started? Quickly, where is Hamilton in the championship? So I don't
Yeah,
sort of.
Hamilton is fifth in championship. He's behind he's 28 points, 2 points behind Perez, and 3 points ahead of Max.
Okay.
But I think, yeah, I'm actually quite impressed with Russell. I won't lie that I might be one of the few people who might have been a bit skeptical of Russell in the Mercedes. Oh, and I know we saw him in Sakir a couple of years ago when Hamilton was out with COVID, and he just completely thrashed Bottas until the whole pit stop shenanigans. But yeah, I just kind of did feel that. Yeah, yes, he was fantastic in qualifying. We don't call him Mr. Saturday for nothing, but I do feel that his race pace at times was not up there. Because there's loads of times with Latifi, who, as much as he's a nice guy, he's not the fastest person on the grid. The fact that Latifi was consistently catching up to Russell, especially in the second half of the season last year, I kind of started to get a bit skeptical how well Russell would be compared to Hamilton. But he's definitely done a very good job so far, just keeping up there with him.
And obviously, it seems like Mercedes have sort of not that they've lucked into a harmonious team environment. Obviously, I think today, as we're recording it, I think Hamilton put out a post about how him and George Russell went surfing. Obviously, there's joking around there. But do you think that maybe because they're a bit further back and Mercedes recognise that, at least at the moment, consistency is how they keep up? It's consistently putting in, I guess, the third or the fourth or the fifth and the sixth when nothing else goes wrong. But when stuff does go wrong, when Verstappen retires, when Sainz has a bad qualifying and retires, then they can get up to the thirds and the fourths. And do you think that both drivers maybe recognise that if it does come down to it, if there is a race, as we saw in Australia, obviously Russell in third, Hamilton in fourth, if there is that sort of thing, they will just start sort of hold station because it's more about the team game, especially as both drivers are realistically quite far back in the drivers' championship, and unless something changes quite quickly, probably not destined to win it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the way to put it. I would say it's definitely good to see that Mercedes has a genuinely good team relationship right now, especially with the two titans of a driver we see in Russell and Hamilton, especially compared to what happened last time when they had two number one drivers on the grid. But that's because the car was a front runner. It was winning the championship when it was Rosberg and Hamilton. But I think right now it's good to see that them two are definitely getting along, just having a bit of fun, playing the team game, just helping each other out.
Yeah, and I think that will continue over the next few races, especially if Mercedes don't end up upgrading their car. I mean, speaking of a team that looked like they'd upgraded their car, but apparently hadn't, McLaren. Obviously, going from what was one of their worst races in years in Bahrain to qualifying fourth and sixth in the end at Australia, coming home in
Fifth
sixth
and
and seventh, or fifth and sixth.
Wait, it was fifth.
It was,
yeah, it was fifth and sixth.
Because obviously one Ferrari, one Red Bull out of the race. But Lando Norris after the race saying they'd not done anything to the car. It just went well. Obviously, apparently Australia has always been a bit different in terms of how it's laid out. So do you think that this was just a track that benefited them and they might slip back? Or do you think it's the beginning of something different? And maybe when Lando Norris says they haven't done anything, it's again a bit of PR talk to try and downplay some improvements that they've made.
No, I don't think they generally have done anything, just because I think now they do. The Formula One is now making the teams actually advertise the new stuff, new upgrades they put on the cars and everything. I don't think McLaren actually put anything on that, put new upgrades on that car from what they said on that new upgrades thing that they're talking. They have teams have to put in, but it's a bit difficult to tell, to be honest, whether McLaren are actually faster, because Australia is a different track. It seems to have completely different characteristics compared to what other trucks seem to tell. And I think not really known to Imola really, because that's one of the more high downforce tracks in the grid to see how McLaren really compared towards the rest of the grid.
Yeah, but I mean, good to see. Obviously, Danny Rick in the points,
Yeah,
obviously home favourite, and they just again, it was like there were a lot of races that were just very standard throughout the grid. Obviously, Mercedes probably having a standard one, Leclerc having a very standard one, just winning everything.
hmm
And McLaren, once they qualified up there, once they did get back into the position that realistically they probably should be, and they probably should be the fourth, maybe even the third best team on the grid. It was just fairly casual.
yeah,
They did it. Maybe Alonso, the only potential path in their way, but obviously he dropped back right at the end. And other than that, it was just they were just there. They just drove
yeah,
and came home for a solid haul of points.
yeah. I think, to be honest, in the whole of the midfield, the only real big thing that happened was just Gasly struggling to get past Stroll for half the race. And I think that was about it, really.
Yeah, and you know what? We'll move on to that. We'll move on to, I guess, Aston Martin in particular, who had one of the worst weekends in F1 history. I mean, so what? I'm trying to think of all the crashes they had. So obviously there was Q3, both drivers crashed.
Yeah,
Then practice three, both drivers crashed. Then
yep,
Q1, Stroll crashed. Then into the race, did Vettel spin off? Oh no,
yeah,
Vettel ran wide and then crashed.
yep,
Then Stroll pitted twice under the safety car, held up the grid for the entire like middle third of the race. Got a
yep.
5 second time penalty, then got overtaken by everyone.
And then just barging Valtteri Bottas off in turn 4, I believe. I think.
Yeah, and then even after the race, they were still getting sticks thrown at them or stuff thrown at them. But they were getting the safety car criticised. It was the safety cars going too slow. It was the worst weekend I can think of for a team for a long time, and it was just so bad in terms of how it went. And it really feels like Aston Martin are the worst team on the grid now. Obviously, it was probably between Aston Martin and Williams. I'd say at the moment you've got the two top teams. Mercedes are sort of in like their own special bubble, third
Yep,
place, like too slow, but too fast for the midfield. Then you've got, I say the next five teams probably interchanging quite a lot.
yeah,
Maybe Alpine slightly ahead of the rest, but
yeah.
maybe
You could
not.
say that.
It's hard to say.
Yeah,
And then Aston Martin and Williams at the back. But well, obviously Alex Albon getting a point, and we'll come on to him later. But it just feels like Aston Martin. What has gone wrong for them
right.
over the last few years?
Yeah. I don't. I'm just still shell shocked about, especially Sebastian's weekend. Like, of all weekends, he couldn't have asked for a worse first weekend of the season. Well, I think FE won his engine caught fire, then he got the €5,000 fine for the whole
I
scooter thing.
I forgot his engine caught fire, and then he didn't even
Yeah,
do FP2.
yeah. And then like he had that whole scooter thing when he rode the scooter around the truck, which is fun to watch actually. And then obviously the whole crashing, when all the crashes happen throughout the weekend. It's just like you cannot ask for a more amateur hour from a four-time world champion.
Hmm. And then obviously Lance Stroll. You have to, right. I'm going to throw it out there. I don't think that he had a bad race. I think he did what he really realistically could done, and he
Yeah,
did it fairly well. Obviously, the Bottas incidents were the only blemish, but realistically, he held cars that are a lot faster than his behind for 30 odd laps.
yeah,
But it was just so uninspiring. It was just like, get out of the way. Obviously, it ended up being good for one driver, Alex Albon, who we will come on to talk about, I guess, actually next. But it just feels like Aston Martin are nowhere, and
no,
it's like, how are they going to deal with it?
I don't know. I mean, I think, to be honest, the whole year they should just scrap it. Because the thing is, I don't think the car's just not going to. They can't develop the car
Mm.
fast enough to get to the midfield by the end of the season. I think, to be honest, they're probably just going to write off this year at this rate.
Mm. But it's interesting because although they seem like the worst team, I reckon they could still score points because,
No,
and
they can do.
we will move on to the other star of the show at this race, Alex Albon, doing all of the race on one set of hard tyres, save for the final lap, where he put on a set of softs, came out and scored and came P10. And realistically, back ever since 2014, there's always been at least one team that won't score points. I think obviously 2014 to 16 it was either Caterham or Marussia or Manor or whatever they were called
Yep.
every other race. Then 2017 and 18 were a bit better in terms of equity. I think Sauber probably then occupied that spot at the back of the grid before Williams fell down it for the last few seasons. Obviously, Haas last season as well. But we look at the back of the grid team in Williams, and realistically, this race is fairly standard. Like there's a few retirements, some of them come from the top 10. It's not like a Hungary where you've only got like 12 cars finishing it,
Yeah.
and if you are in a bottom place team, you're more than likely going to score points.
Yeah.
It was a fairly standard race, and Alex Albon in a team that is at the back of the grid still managed to finish 10th. So I think they've got a hope, Aston Martin. I mean,
No.
or do you think something completely different?
No, I definitely won't write off them scoring some form points in the season. I mean, last year they also, I think it was last year, they had the seventh fastest car and they still managed to get 2 podiums. I mean, one was disqualified in Hungary, but the fact that Sebastian Vettel managed to drag up to 2 podium places throughout the season and the seventh fastest car, I wouldn't discount them being even scoring points in more than a couple of occasions, to be
Yeah,
honest.
and we will say a big well done to Alex Albon, a
Yeah,
lovely person, and I think this could be one of those drives you look back on almost, especially, or maybe we need to see how the trajectory of the Williams car goes, whether how far back they are in terms of, I guess, the rest of the season. But this could be one of the drives of the season if they do
yeah,
prove to just be a back marker team, and then he finishes 10th in a very good performance. He's like he seems to just get better and better on those tires. He was almost lapping at the pace of like the Red Bull and the Mercedes
yeah.
by the end of it.
Yeah, that was it. 57. So it ended up being what, 57 lap stint on the
Yeah,
tires. Like, how often do you hear 57 lap stint on tires nowadays? It's it's still brilliant, actually. Is
yeah.
Albon becoming a new Perez?
I've seen there's been a new crop of memes about this. It's just like you pick because your tires are degrading terribly. I pick because I'm required to by the technical regulations. We're not the same.
Yeah,
It's a great meme, but it does show that Albon deserves to be on the grid because realistically, you compare it to Latifi, who I'm not going to say doesn't deserve to be on the grid, but I think there's better drivers
yeah,
out there. He's come into the team, and 3 races in, he's scoring points in what is probably not that good of a car. Whereas Latifi's still languishing down in the lower halves of the bottom
yeah.
10.
I'm just looking at the results from last year. He finished 16th. And so, like, the only people behind was Verstappen, Vettel, and Sainz all DNF'd. And then Alonso, who had an oil spill problem the whole race. So he was pretty much the
Yeah.
last of all the working cars. So, whereas Albon did put in the points. So kind of says a lot.
And it will be interesting to see if Albon can maybe score some more points throughout the rest of the season. But we'll finally move on to, I guess, one other team who had quite an interesting, actually, weekend in particular, Alpine. Obviously, Fernando Alonso seemingly on for a front row start before he crashed, apparently due to a piece that was worth £1.50, which
Yeah,
on an F1 car worth millions, I always find it really enjoyable when the £1.50 piece breaks. And then looking on for a good result in the race before, obviously you were saying that he had an oil oily. But Esteban Ocon proving to be the quietly underrated at the moment. Obviously, I think on a 7-odd point streak, the most outside of, I think, Hamilton and Leclerc. And it was like, he's really ruining my second fantasy team because it's doing better than my first one because it just keeps being inconsistent. And it is a bit annoying. But do you think Alpine will be disappointed by this weekend?
Yeah, I think that would be. I mean, especially with what Fernando was saying that he could have put it on pole. Whether he could, that was a different story. But it's good to see that. It's good to see Alpine just starting to resurge up the grid, and Ocon is finally deciding to put on some consistency for what might be the first time in his time in F1, to be honest. Because his consistency was probably one of his Achilles' heels in his racing, to be honest.
Yeah, and do you think that maybe Alpine can begin to challenge the top three teams, or do you think this was a bit of an Australia? This was a bit because the track is so different. There were teams maybe up there, or even potentially down there. Obviously, Haas having a poorer weekend than they have for the last two races. Do you think this is just a one-off, or do you think Alpine can start to challenge the top teams?
I don't think they can challenge the top teams, to be honest. I think they're a bit too far behind the top three, but I feel they definitely can be challenging the very top. At least challenging the best of the rest. At least gain points when the top teams do have a fumbling or whenever the Red Bulls break down again or something like that. But yeah.
Well, we'll wait and see. And I think that is probably finishes off the discussion of the Australian Grand Prix. Is there anything we've forgotten or you want to add?
No, not really, to be honest. That's all we have.
Yeah, okay. And we'll move on to just, I guess, one bit of news that has come out in the last 2 weeks. Very conveniently continuing the Thursday curse of being dropped after. Actually, I think technically it was Wednesday, but we recorded the last episode on the Tuesday that time. It was just kept going wrong. But F1 returning actually to Las Vegas, obviously hosting the season finale in Caesars Palace in 1982. Widely regarded as one of the worst circuits in F1 history. It's a bit different now, obviously. I can describe it pretty short run to turn one before they turn left and then back right onto one of the long straights. Then we got the sort of turn 4 at Sochi vibes with actually I think turn 5 at the track before we go on to I think 2 or 3 miles long straight.
Yeah.
Before finishing off with just a chicane, another straight, and back onto the pit straight. I mean, it will be hosted on a Saturday night in America. Obviously, it means if you enjoyed the 6 o'clock start for the Australian Grand Prix, you're going to love the 3 o'clock start that Las Vegas is going to give us. But obviously, F1 moving to America. It's owned by Americans now. Third American race on the calendar. A bit of disquiet. Obviously, personally, I'm of the opinion that the arguments that Europe gets 11 races, so America can have 3, to be quite convincing. And none of the tracks look especially terrible. But do you like the track? Do you like the idea of F1 returning to Las Vegas? Or what do you think about it?
I mean, the track, I'm 50-50 on it. It doesn't look like it. It looks like it's going to be one of those races that's just going to be more for the spectacles and the PR and just the visuals. Just to watch Saturday night, F1 cars racing down the Las Vegas Strip, it's just be one sight to behold. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. And I'm definitely happy to see just Formula One just race around there, to be honest. Saturday night, I'll possibly be happy to sacrifice one night just to watch it. I'm pretty sure almost everybody else around the world pretty much has to wake up 3-4 in the morning to watch F1 races. So It's not the biggest thing in the world, but yeah, I think definitely America having 3 races is definitely the perfect number.
Yeah, because I guess it's one on, I guess, the West Coast, one on the East Coast, and one sort of in the middle. I like the track. I think it is unique in a way for how top speed how much top speed it has, and I think F1 cars going down the Las Vegas Strip at night is going to look spectacular. And to be honest, I don't mind having some races that are a bit more showcasey than others. That's the reason we kept
Yeah.
Monaco on the grid or on the calendar for the last 70 years. Do we need it anymore? Can we just get rid of Monaco? Like, I know the purists are up in arms,
Yeah.
but it's such a terrible circuit.
Yeah, at least with Las Vegas, the right time stuff, it's just cars zooming past. We won't get bored of that, but I think Monaco just cars stopping and starting, just squeezing their way through the streets. I think it's just a bit too much now.
Yeah, I've already got some predictions lined up when we do our Monaco preview, involving the number of overtakes on track that we will see during that race. But we'll come on to them when we come to them. And I guess just finally, it's Las Vegas is a weird one because obviously it will be on a Saturday. It is really built around an American audience. Do you think it's good for F1 that maybe we're just win? It's another street circuit as well. Do you think the race is good for F1, or do you think would you prefer going back to like Germany being more? Would you like a purist, or you've got to embrace the new environment of it all?
I mean, as much as I would love going back to Germany, I mean, to be honest, we've got other tracks we can just scrap, cough, cough, Abu Dhabi, that we can move to places like Germany and go to other proper racetracks. But I think now we've got to start moving. Like, we've got a huge market in America, and at the end of the day, Formula One is not just a sport, it's a business. They've got to make more money. So, to provide all this stuff. So I kind of see the whole appeal of going to America and doing these more street tracks. If it's going to bring up, cause this will at the end of the day, it's more of a money making machine. These sort of races.
Oh, I've thought of some really good marketing if they want to make Las Vegas the season finale and Mercedes go back to the black car and it's a Ferrari and Mercedes title decider because then it's red or black. Oh, the marketing would be so good. Sign me up and you know what? Actually, make Las Vegas the season finale. I would very happily watch that track as the season finale.
Yeah. Let's be honest, anything is better than Abu Dhabi at this rate.
Let's just leave Abu Dhabi. We don't need to be there. But another race that has been talked about, especially over the last few days, is Kyalami. Obviously, one criticism of the World Championship is that it's not technically a World Championship. We don't race on the African continent, and there has always been that desire, I guess, to go back to South Africa for a bit. I think, apart from Morocco in 1958, the only African country to host an F1 race. Obviously, I think apparently it needs homologation to meet I don't know what that. I can never say that word, but it needs upgrading to reach grade 1 standards. So wouldn't be on it until about 2024. But do you think there has always seemed to be, especially over the last few years, a desire to go back to Africa and make it truly a world championship? So how realistic do you think that is to happen?
I'd say it's pretty realistic, to be honest. I mean, I'm just seeing how worldwide and global Liberty Media have been trying to push this sport over the last few years. And I mean, yes, we've ended up being in the Middle East a lot more than we wanted, but yeah, it's just good to see how, South Africa is going to possibly return. We could see more African countries. You could see more tracks coming into the thing in general. I just really hope that Liberty Media are really good at circling this track and don't just make a 45 race calendar or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, we'll probably talk about it at some point, maybe on an off week. But I do think they should have a rotating calendar. At least have like 5 or 6 races that rotate on and off, because I think it gets more races involved. It's cheaper, obviously, if we want to get classic tracks like Germany back on the calendar, and it could potentially be an option for the future. Yeah, so we've finished the news, we've finished Australia, so we'll move on to the next race of the season at Imola. Obviously, the second race of the season last year. This time it's the fourth race. A decent track. I mean, quite a good race last year. Obviously, the first crack in Hamilton's armour beginning to show, drifting off the track while trying to overtake George Russell. Maybe we'll see some of the same this year, but obviously Russell in the Mercedes. Russell and Bottas coming together, bringing out the red flag before Hamilton recovering up to second. I mean, what are your thoughts on Imola being on the calendar? It's a really weird one. It's the only non-permanent 2020 race that's stuck around.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised it's that one, if I'm going to be completely honest.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I mean, the track is not really... I mean, it's a legendary track. You can't deny it. Imola's got so much history behind it, and it's provided some of the biggest races that we've ever seen, whether for good reasons or bad reasons. But yeah, it's definitely a track that's really difficult to overtake. You can't really have much close racing around it. Yeah, I completely understand why you think it's somehow the one that's stuck around.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Turkey, the Nürburgring as well, and we've got Imola, and it's all right. It's here. Maybe it's here to stay. Maybe it will drop off in a few years. But we'll move on to some of our predictions. Did you want to do just the general podcast predictions first? Obviously, we were talking about it. We just took a quick break to make our predictions, and apparently I'm in 10th. Don't know how this has happened. But...
There's 11 of us who are doing it, and currently the standings are showing that Kvyat is actually winning in first place with 28 points. Currently in second place, we've got actually it's joint second. Nick and Katch are actually joint second with 26, and fourth place would be me, 22, and unfortunately we got all the way down.
Wow.
Well, we got in 10th, unfortunately.
How have I done this? Remind us how the points are given out again.
So the predictions we made were obviously the drivers and the constructors championships, which in our prediction they gave 10 points for correctly guessing that. We got the most driver of the days, which gave 6 points, and then we'd had each team with quali battles, so who outqualifies more between Hamilton, Russell, Verstappen, Perez, whatever, that gave 2 points each. And then we had to choose one race in the season and then one team that was not the top four from last year. So we couldn't choose Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari. And we score as many points as the team scores in that particular race. So...
Well, I mean, hopefully I can come back. I went for Alpine at Silverstone, looking like quite a decent one, but inevitably that will be the race where they crash into each other and get a double DNF. But we'll have to wait and see. And obviously, we've got our prediction. Obviously, our prediction battle. We made some for the Australian Grand Prix. It's currently 1-0 to me in the standings.
5-4. We've changed it.
Oh yeah, we're doing it like that, aren't we?
It's 5-4 to you, and I think this week you extend that lead even more because.
So obviously, we'll remind everyone what we do. So obviously, we predict the top three. You get 3 points for a correct position. So obviously, if you say Leclerc first, and he wins, you get 3 points. But if you say Leclerc first and he comes third, then you get a point for that. And then we make a 1.2 point, and a 3 point prediction. Obviously, the 3.1 one's got to be a lot more out there than the 1 for just something general that has happened or that will happen throughout the weekend. So, what did we say for the Australian Grand Prix?
So, for the podiums, you and Jack put Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz, and then I put, which 2 of them DNF'd, unfortunately, and then I put Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez. So, I think
I get 3 points and you get 2.
Yes.
If I'm right.
Yep, that'll be right. And then for our for our first point, I put Sonoda in Q2, and then you put both Astons out in Q1, which I think both were true.
What was Sonoda in Q2?
I think Sonoda was in Q2 because
I will look it up.
Because both Astons were out. I think Latifi and Albon were out, and somebody else as well.
Trying to find it quickly. We're so prepared for all of this. So out in Q1,
Albon, Magnussen, Vettel, Latifi, and Stroll.
Yep. So we both get a point there. So that makes it 4-3.
Yep. And then our 2 points. You put Ricardo points, and I put Haas pit stop failure. So you got 2 points.
2 points.
I don't.
Looking back on it, it doesn't look like a 2-pointer, but when we were making them and how bad McLaren was, it's definitely worth 2 points.
And then both our extreme prediction, I put an Alfa Romeo in P7, which is so close because Bottas was P8.
Oh no!
That close. And then you guys were a bit more out. You said over 4 cars with DNF in the first corner at the start.
It could have happened. There were a lot of clips of that 2002 start before the start or before the weekend started. It was just like I was hoping for that, and it really didn't happen.
Yeah, but so I think at the
what did the weekend end with? Was it 7-4 to me?
It's 6-3.
Oh, 6-3.
So 6-3. So if we add that out from last week, that means you're 11-7.
Ooh, the gap's extending. We'll have to two. I guess 2 predictions in. Obviously, 3 races in. We'll have to wait and see whether you can bring the gap back. Obviously, we've now got our predictions for. Is it still called the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix?
It's that ridiculously long name.
Can we just go back to calling it the San Marino Grand Prix, despite the fact it's just not in San Marino? It was great.
Yeah, can do.
It made so much sense.
Well, it's called. Well, realistically, it's the Rolex Grand Premio del Made in Italy in Emilia Romagna Grand Prix.
I'm loving all like the fancy like French and Italian words, and then just made in Italy, like just shoved in the middle there.
It's just, so ridiculous.
Right. So, do we want to do our podiums then? So I've gone for Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton.
Okay.
Sort of comes into one of my 1, 2, and 3 predictions, but I've gone for that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a bit conservative, but obviously that's worth it. I've completely thrown the ball out the ballpark. I've gone completely absurd. I've gone Sainz, Verstappen, Hamilton.
You know what? If it happens, I might get bonus points. If Sainz wins, I'll give you an extra bonus point for that.
Yeah,
because that's fun. That will be good.
Yeah, so I think we both got the same second and third, which is not too thing anyway. So it all depends on which Ferrari wins.
Right. So what have you gone for your 1, 2, and 3 pointers?
Okay, I'm going to ask. My third point might not be extreme enough, but I'll see. My first point has got at least 2 red flags in total between the sprint race and the Sunday race.
Okay, so 2 red flags, competitive racing. Is that your 1 point?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then my second point, because how far Leclerc has been, I got Sainz to out-qualify Leclerc in the race, in the sprint.
Is that the sprint quali?
The actual quali, yeah.
Okay,
Friday qualifying. And then third point, I'm gonna say no Red Bull DNFs on either the sprint or the Sunday race. But
you know what? I'll give it to you because I think your 1 point is more like a 2 point.
Yeah.
So I'll
we
say
could swap it around, to be honest, but
no, it's all right. I'll give you your 3 points like a 2 point. Your 1 point's also like a 2 point. So you know what? It averages out the same. I will give you the no Red Bull DNFs. And then, or do we? It's just a bit of fun, and we'll have
Yeah.
to wait and see how it goes. So my 1 point, I've gone for Sainz out qualifies Perez
Okay.
in obviously the actual qualifying for the sprint race. Then
Yeah.
in the sprint race, I've said one of the big six DNFs.
Yeah.
So I think that's 2 point worthy. You reckon?
Can say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of one of Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull DNFs in the sprint.
Yeah. You're giving
And
me my 3-pointer, so I'll give you that.
And then my 3-pointer is in 8th, 9th, and 10th in this order. It's a McLaren, an AlphaTauri, and an Alfa Romeo.
So you got McLaren.
So there's a McLaren in 8th, an AlphaTauri in 9th, and an Alfa Romeo in 10th.
Oh, that's a
I've gone very specific. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, it's 11-7 now.
Yeah.
So, well, maybe you'll be clawing some points back when.
Yeah, let's
but
see how it goes.
You know what? When it is Norris, Gasly, Guan Yu Zhou in 8th, 9th, and 10th, I'll be laughing.
Yeah.
So that has been. I think that's been everything. Thank you for listening. Thank you for, as ever, assisting me in putting on the show, Chinmay. Anything else you want to say?
Nope. Just looking forward for Emily now.
Yeah, no, it should be a good one. And we will be back in, I think, either 1 or 2 weeks. The next show, hopefully, back in the live studio. You'll get some crystal clear audio as opposed to our online headphones. But no, should be a good one. And thank you for listening.